Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SLAPcast. This is episode 17 of our coverage of the 2023-24 season. I'm your host, Gage, as usual, and this is the second half of our staggered winter break coverage in the Premier League. It's going to be another short-ish episode for us today as we try to make our way back to regular Premier League action. Kind of feels a bit like the wasteland right now with such intermittent action and not too many games happening. We are thankfully joined today by the entire contingent, and let's shake it up this week, starting with Josh. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am psyched to be back, and I am pleased to be joined by Ethan as well. Hello, Ethan.
Hello, Gage. The allergies have been whipping my butt, but I'm happy to be on the podcast.
I'm telling you, I'm in the same boat right now as well. And Reese, last but not least, we have Reese. Hello, Reese.
Hello, I'm happy to be here with my new camera angle.
Yeah, the dual monitor, man. Brother has improved his setup. So shout out to you. All right, let's kick things off with the question of the day from Josh.
Okay, so I apologize to Ethan, but it's not like, what is Crystal Palace's worst moment ever? It is. So I was just scrolling on, I think, Instagram, and the NBC Premier League account posted like all of the Puskas award winners. So you had like Lamella's, Salah's, but then like the best of the best was Giroud's scorpion kick against Palace. So I wanted to ask you all, what is your favorite goal that you've seen in your club score? And Reese, you can't say the Giroud one just because
he was asleep when it happened. I was there.
I slept through that game.
I can go first, give you all a little bit of time to think, but I don't think this one will take much thinking. Mine is in the 15-16 season when Mahrez sends this insane ball over the top to Vardy against Liverpool, and he just smashes the volley from outside, like outside of the box, and just like all the way over, like almost at the corner of the 18-yard box, and just smashes it over Mignolet, who I did not think about for years until I was thinking about this question. But that goal is insane. And he and Mahrez did that like 3 or 4 separate times, but it was never on the volley, except for that one. It was always like a half volley or an insane touch. But that is my by far favorite one.
That's one of the few goals I've ever seen that had forward spin on the ball, where he strikes it and it dips, like it goes up and then immediately dips down. It's crazy. It's funny you bring up the Puskás thing because Spurs actually won the Puskás 2 years in a row, or a Spurs player won the Puskás 2 years in a row when the Sun dribbling through the entire team against Burnley and then Lamella's Rabona against Arsenal in the North London Derby. Well, obviously. That one
trophy.
Yeah, exactly. That one doesn't actually, well, we lost the game and he got sent off.
He got so that's the crazy thing. That's just insane.
It's the most like classic Eric Lamela thing to ever happen. Gets subbed on in the 10th minute, scores a Rabona, and then gets sent off. But I kind of think both of those goals are fake because I don't really, the Sun one, like it's a cool goal, but I'm shocked it won the Puskás just because it wasn't like crazy technique or anything. And then the Lamela one doesn't really count. Well, A, because we lost the game, and B, because it was during COVID. So there was no fans. And I feel like it just makes it so much better when there's fans. And
I feel like the Puskás needs to like exclude like the major leagues and like the top 5 in Europe. And just because there's always like nominees from like some random.
No, I hate that.
Dude, I love those.
Some guy in the Ethiopian second division scores a scorpion kick from the halfway line. Like that doesn't count. Insane. Like I don't want to see that.
I do.
But the one I'm actually gonna go with is also a goal against Arsenal, and maybe it's more for the like vibe than it is for the actual technique of the goal. But I'm thinking also of the 15-16 goal season where Harry Kane picks up the ball like on the edge of the box from a position where no normal human would shoot from and curls it into the top corner postage stamp, sprints across to the corner. Yeah, the Bat Kane goal, and rips off his mask and just goes insane. And that was when it really felt like we were going to win the league that season too. Like, cause it was still early. Well, it was early enough that everyone was like, oh, Leicester's fake. Like they'll fade away, whatever. And then like we had been losing that game up to that point, and Alderweireld scored like 2 minutes before. And then Kane does that, and White Hart Lane goes banana bonkers. And it was, yeah, that's probably my favorite goal I've ever seen. So
Mine is actually going to be a kind of recent goal. It's the Reece Nelson goal against Bournemouth last year. Just because that moment, similarly to Gage, was kind of the first moment, because I'd been flirting with the idea that maybe we could win the league, but up until that point, I didn't want to get my hopes up. But then that goal went in, and I was like, oh my God, we're winning the league. Obviously it didn't happen. Bummer, but it was just all good vibes at that point. I was going absolutely bananas, like throwing stuff around the room, running and jumping and falling and yelling. And yeah, that was just the most hype I have ever been, I think.
and it was a
Throwback to-
banger.
It was a
yeah,
banger.
it was a banger. Throwback to when I was last happy with my team was first season under Vieira. I forget, I think it was 21, 22. We had the crazy good player at the time on loan, Conor Gallagher. We were playing Everton at home, and we had 2 goals up on them, and they score one more, so they're putting pressure on us. And then out of nowhere, while we're in their half, Conor Gallagher steals the ball outside the box on the left side of the D, and then Benteke is calling for it, and Conor Gallagher's like, "No, you're shit, lad. I'm not passing it to your big head." And he curls it right into the top corner, bar down into the side, or into in the side, and he just like runs his ass off to the corner and does like one of the best knee slides I've ever seen. And I was just so happy because Everton were being shitheads that whole game. So I was very hyped. And it's funny when you go back and not even watch the ball go in, you could just see Gallagher's like running so damn fast to the corner, and it was very hype. But yeah.
Well, Josh has graced us with the question of the day and disappeared, so we're gonna move on now.
I apologize. The dog has learned that if a door is cracked, she can just throw her body against it and it'll open. She thought the door was cracked, and just all I heard was a, and I was like, "Oh, what is going on?" So I apologize.
Open sesame.
For
So
real.
since we are somewhat devoid of match week content, which, not to worry, but there are a few things that we need to get across, which will come later on in the episode. And by we, I mean Ethan, has devised another mystery segment. Last week we had a quiz, obviously, and this one is equally certain to cause a little bit of controversy and dispute. So we've got 2 portions of the segment, which we're first going to start off with the, I would say, easier one, or at least the one that I think we're going to agree on more as far as the team of the season so far. So we all agreed to pick players in the style of a 4-3-3 with 6, 8, and 10 in midfield. And obviously there may be some kind of shoehorning, but I generally tried to keep it to those correct positions. And everyone's got a team, and I'm very curious to see how things have lined up. So let's start off with the goalkeeper. We'll go back to front, and I'm going to get things rolling here by teeing up the guy who came up with this segment in terms of Ethan. So,
Yep. Great introduction. So I thought it'd be a good idea just because, it's a little bit over halfway through the season, but I think it'd be good to kind of point out who all has been doing good. And I don't know if we mentioned it yet, but we've also got an underappreciated 11 after it. So for goalkeeper, I personally went with Allison. We played Liverpool recently, and we had a lot of good chances. Josh, did you watch that game, right, too? Liverpool.
Yes.
Yeah. And
He was
Allison, he was insane. Yeah, he made a ton of saves, and I'm sure all his other games were like that. So I had to go with him.
He was my pick as well. I think he's the best keeper in the world right now. He is so good at everything. Like, his positioning's great. His athletic ability to make saves is great. His distribution is absolutely insane.
Yeah, and I mean, there was a time where he was just like making a few mistakes, kind of like De Gea, but I don't think he's made any mistake like that in a minute.
Yeah, I've also got Allison. Don't really have much to add, though.
I've gone Maverick on the first one, and it's not going to surprise anyone that I've gone with Vicario as my goalkeeper of the season. Now, I do have a stat line to back it up to, in terms of the fact that he leads the league in post-shot XG differential, which is something that we talked about a long time ago on the podcast, but is essentially a statistic that demonstrates how many goals the goalkeeper has saved above expected, essentially. And Vicario leads the league in that category at the moment. And also, my thing with Allison is, yes, I agree 100%. He's the best goalkeeper in the world. But in terms of his impact on the team this season, I think Vicario probably just edges him out just a little bit for me. And I'm obviously biased, but yeah, I think the introduction of Vicario has changed things for Spurs in a huge way. And he's made quite a few spectacular saves this season. I'm thinking back to the one where he's diving backwards against Burnley, a couple great saves with his legs against Everton, and one against Fulham, where Polina was heading to the far corner and he stretched out as long as humanly possible and kept it out. So my vote is for Vicario.
He would have been my second pick. The thing for me was just I've talked about how I've been relatively unconvinced with Liverpool's defense, but despite that, he's top or he's joint Golden Glove leader right now with Pickford. So that was kind of just where I went with that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's hard to argue against Allison. I've chosen to do it anyway for some reason, but it is hard to argue with him. So let's go. Should we go right to left or left to right? What do we think?
Right.
Go right to left.
Okay, right back. I'll give it over to Ethan once again.
So the fullback positions were ones I struggled with a little bit, just because I feel like, the fullbacks who usually do well aren't doing as well as they used to be, or injured. But I've gone with, they've had a shaky December winter break kind of, but I've gone for Trippier just because he's still providing a lot of assists, which is, I feel like obviously fullbacks provide, an attacking sense, but their main coverage is defense, and he's able to do a little bit of both. And so the fact that he's got a good assist numbers is impressive to me.
Josh.
Sorry, I didn't know we were going to a specific order. I also have Trippier for similar reasons. I struggled with a little bit. My honorable mention was Porro. I think he's been great this season, but I think defensively is just where he's young still. So I think in a couple of years he'll be fully developed. I just think he's not the complete right back yet. He's obviously a complete wing back, but I think just a strictly right back. I don't think he's been amazing.
Yeah, he's positionally unaware a lot.
Yeah.
I just talked about how I was unconvinced by their defense, but I've gone with Trent. On the basis of how the fullback position has kind of evolved in the past few years amongst the likes of Arsenal, Liverpool, City, Tottenham, with this kind of inverted mentality. And I think in this inverted role, I think Trent is one of the best in the world. He's unbelievable coming into the midfield. And in that role, it kind of gives him a little bit of leeway with his defensive liabilities because, he's not expected to defend as much. So it really, I think it elevates his game because it highlights what he's good at for sure.
100%. I'm on board with that. I've got Trent in my team as well. I think he's had some high profile errors that have led to goals this season, but other than that, I mean, other than that, of course, I think he's been decent defensively, better than he has been in the past, maybe. And also, to Reese's point, the traditional fullback almost doesn't exist anymore in a lot of cases. It does in more well, actually, it probably does in the majority of systems in the league, but tactically, in 10 years, I don't think the traditional fullback will really exist anymore. It's either going to be some combination of inverted fullbacks or wingbacks who are more or less midfielders. Both cases of that are more or less midfielders. So yeah, I've gone for Trent as well.
Trent pick, but the one of the stats I saw, he is joint third for mistakes leading directly to a goal.
I think, yeah, that's definitely worth pointing out. I think part of that is when you're in the inverted fullback role, if you make a mistake, it's high probability it leads to a goal because you're down a defender instantly, right? So I feel like it's very what's the word? It's very visible when you make mistakes, right? You can't really hide from them. It's kind of like goalkeeper, honestly. Like if a goalie makes a mistake, obviously they're getting scored on. This position, I feel, is very similar.
Yeah, I don't know. Just eye test wise, I feel like he's as much of a liability as Poro is. But that's just my opinion on it.
You are right about the errors leading to the goals in terms of he is joint second, but he has 2. So it's not, it sounds worse than it is, I think, in terms of that fact. But the one against Arsenal was really bad. I can't really think of the other one off the top of my head, but the one against Arsenal is the one that springs to mind. I think it might have actually been Salah who passed the ball, but Trent was so far out of position that it ran straight through for Saka. Was that this season? I think it was.
I don't remember. So
I'm pretty
I
sure it was.
actually, I don't know.
Anyway, yeah, I've gone with Trent though. So, okay, I mean, I guess we could do the center backs together, or we
Yeah.
could do,
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
stick with fullback.
Let's do it like we did the Mario 11.
Okay, so over to the left side then, left fullback. Ethan, did you struggle with this one as much? Or this is kind of one where I feel like there's a slight deficit in the Premier League. Like there's not one standout option, I think.
I mean, usually it'd be Andy Robertson, but he's been, I guess, he's injured.
Yeah.
Yeah, or
So he's been
Chilwell
out.
even, who's also
Yeah.
injured.
Yeah. Gage will be happy. I went with Udogie. I
Udogie!
think, he doesn't have too many stats, but I feel like, he's impacted this team so well. And the fact that, I feel like it could have been a position that Tottenham have struggled with for a second, but the fact that they've got him now, it seems that he's got his spot and, they won't have to worry about bringing someone in anymore. And he's just been great so far.
This works out well for me because I'm maintaining my campaign that Udogie's the best left back in the league / world. Even if is it true? Probably not, but I'm maintaining my campaign of that anyway. And yeah, I've also got him in my team. I think he's been another high impact player who's come in. He's now finally got a goal. He probably should have had more this season based on the positions he gets in. He's often the highest player on the pitch for Spurs. Very good at pressing, understands his role very well. And he's a monster defensively. Unlike Poro, he is someone who is very positionally aware, very composed, makes great tackles, great blocks. So yeah, he did almost score a ridiculous own goal against Man United when he headed it back towards goal and hit the post. But
didn't he hit the corner of the post?
Almost, yeah. He hit like directly on the upright inside of the post. So yeah. Anyway,
wild one.
Josh, how about you?
Oh, I have Udogie as well. I don't think there's much competition for that spot. Even for like the under. Oh.
No, you go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was gonna say even for the underappreciated 11, I had a player that I went with immediately, but I don't think he's anywhere near as good as Udogie.
The player I've gone with, I've talked about him on the pod before. I think he's just an athletic monster, and that's Anthony Robinson. Talk about traditional fullback. This guy, I think, is one of the best in the league. Well, obviously, I think he's the best in the league currently, since I'm putting him in my best 11 so far. But yeah, I think the role he plays in that form side as well, I honestly think he is their most important player in both defense and attack. Like their outlet in attack is him. It's just get the ball to him on the overlap, have him cross, which required him to do a ton of running up and down the pitch. I think he's pretty consistent defensively as well. So yeah, that's why I went with him at left back.
He's also first in the league in interceptions by 19, and he's top 10 in tackles, which for a fullback is pretty impressive. That it's not all CDMs or center backs.
Yeah, he has 55 interceptions, and the next closest is 36. So
that is absolutely insane.
It's pretty insane. Was that everyone? I think that was everyone, right?
It was.
All right, so let's do the center backs together. I'm going to go ahead and throw out my 2 picks and see if everyone agrees, because I feel like this might be one where we all have the same. I don't know, maybe not. But I've gone for Van Dijk and Saliba. I think these 2 were kind of the ones that came to mind straight away for me. I had a couple other ideas that kind of floated around, maybe put themselves forward. I thought about both of the Spurs guys, but just the fact that they're haven't been available for large portions of the season kind of knocks a point against them. And I thought about the City players, but there hasn't really been a consistent starter there. And then nobody else really came and jumped out at me. So yeah, I went with Van Dijk and Saliba just for consistency, for composure, for overall quality.
Yeah, and I had the same too. I easily picked Saliba just because, he's been great the last few years that he's been playing for Arsenal. I had to think about the second one, but I think just with how Liverpool have been doing recently, Van Dijk is kind of got back to, just how he was originally. Maybe not as good, but still great. So I had to put him as my second.
The thing about Van Dijk for me, and spoiler, it's why I didn't put him in my list, is that I feel like until kind of recently, he hasn't really been up to where he was previously. Um, so that was kind of a point down for me. It's like he was kind of unreliable start of the season, and very recently he looks back up to shape, and I'm like, yeah, he's probably, him and Saliba. I've got Saliba. I'll start with it. I think, him and Saliba are probably the best on like extreme recent form. But the other player I had in mind, who, like you mentioned, was unavailable some due to injury, was Van de Ven. And so I kind of had to weigh in my mind, do I care more about him missing games due to injury or Van Dijk just kind of not being at top quality for the whole season? And I decided to go with Van de Ven. I think my reasoning is that because he is now back and integrated and he looks the same, that's a point for him. I think, it's good to see. The other thing is that he is in a very, I think his role, his center back positioning compared to Van Dijk's is much more exposed because of how high of a line y'all play. I know Liverpool play a high line as well. I don't think Van Dijk could play in the Tottenham system. I just don't think he's quick enough. And Van de Ven is huge and so quick. And so that's why I went with him there. But I totally get the injury stuff. But yeah,
I mean, you're not going to get much argument from me, but
it was between him and Van Dijk for me. But yeah, that would be my reasoning, I guess.
Was for me as well, but I decided to go with Van Dijk just because that defense has been so like unpredictable what the lineup is going to be.
They've changed it so much.
And with the captain responsibilities, I think him not being, if you compare him like what he was previously, like he was the best center back in the world for 2 or 3 years in a row. Him not being to that standard, was still a very good center back, and I just think recency bias is obviously there, but I also think Van de Ven missed a pretty large chunk of the season so far, so I would take a little bit of inconsistency over missing a couple months.
I definitely think if you asked me again in a month and Van Dijk kept up his current form, I would say Van Dijk. The timeline's just kind of awkward in my brain.
Yeah, and I almost picked Van de Ven just because he has been great, but emphasis on the missing a good chunk of the season. But emphasis on what Josh said, Van Dijk's having to play with, people who are kind of fresh to the Premier League.
He's had
like
5
Kwanzaa.
different center back partners.
Yeah. And
he has Joe Gomez on the left.
Yeah. So I think he's had to cover them a few times. Not to say that they play bad, but it's just they're new. So
yeah, it's obviously very different playing alongside Jarell Kwanzaa as it is for, back when he was playing alongside Matip, when Matip was healthy every game and they came out as a center back pairing. But all right, that rounds out the defensive positions. Now let's move into midfield. We're going to obviously move back to front here, I think, is the most logical thing to do. So let's start with number 6. Now, this is one where I had 2 players neck and neck, and I had a very difficult time choosing between them. And Josh is nodding, so I'm going to go to him first.
I broke the rules, so we agreed to. I have Rodri and Declan in my team. I think they both have just been sensational all season. Rodri has been like one of the few consistencies that has helped the City team get back up to form, even though they probably weren't out of form. They probably just missed matches and did the normal City November, December thing. And then Declan has also been a great consistency for Arsenal throughout the season. I think they're just the two best defensive midfielders in the league. And I think it's hard looking at what the rest of the league has been this season. I think it's hard to not put them into the midfield. And I'm sure you'd be able to find a way for them to work. Like I'm sure Rodri could probably play a more reserved 8 role and be perfectly fine if he needed to.
Those are the
Yeah.
players. I was between two.
Yeah.
I was a little bit more strict positionally, and so I decided to pick one. And I went for Declan. I think maybe there's some Arsenal bias there. Really, what it came down to though is because genuinely, I don't think either of them have had a bad game this season. I think both of them have been consistent, at minimum 7 out of 10s, at minimum. Most of the time, 8 out of 10s, right? So what it came down to was who sample size, and Rodri has just missed more games. He had a little bit of stretch of time where he was injured. I think Declan has only missed, I think, 1 game due to injury. Because I really do think they've been on par, and like Josh said, I think they're both the best in this position in the league right now. So yeah, it really just was sample size for me.
That's a good point. But I also was picking between them two, and I ended up picking Rodri instead. I feel like he's gone under the radar and someone who is so essential to Manchester City. Obviously, maybe not on the same length as Kevin De Bruyne, but when he's not playing, he's a huge miss. And so I feel like they don't have good cover for him as well. So I went with Rodri.
I mean, I would say it's on the same plane as KDB, because I think they had the stretch of games where they lost, they lost / drew like 3 games in a row or something, maybe 4. It was all games Rodri was missing. Like there's some stat where it's like, over 60-ish games where Rodri plays, they've lost 6 games, and over like 10 that he hasn't, they
like haven't won any of them or something like that. It's
they've lost the same amount or something.
Okay, so I kind of also cheated because I thought about putting Rodri at 6. Rodri was my first shoe in at 6, and then I kind of thought, well, City is basically everyone's an 8, and then there's Holland. There's 10 8s and Holland. So I was like, okay, well, I'll put Rodri at 8. And I have actually pulled a Maverick name out of nowhere, and it's not because I didn't want to include Declan Rice. I really did. I had him in my team until the last minute, and then I moved this player up from my underappreciated team into the team of the season, and that's Douglas Luiz at Aston Villa. Now, my thought process behind it was kind of like what Reese was saying, that Declan Rice puts in a 7.5 out of 10 every single game, and I absolutely agree. I think he's been a huge revelation in the Arsenal team. I think he's exactly what they need. I've gone for Douglas Luiz because I feel like he doesn't always put in a 7 or a 7.5. Sometimes he puts in a 6 or a 5, but he also puts in 9s and 10s pretty regularly. And I think just in terms of the fact that he has such a huge impact on the Villa team as a deep line playmaker, 6 goals, 3 assists from a traditional 6 position on the field, a threat from set pieces, and it was very close. Like I said, I had Declan Rice in the team until the last second, and then what actually tipped the scales is I was like, I don't have a single Villa player in the team. And I was like, I feel like I need to put a Villa player in the team, and he was the one that stood out to me. So that was what made the decision at the end of the day. I guess we'll segue to 8 because Josh and I have Rodri more or less listed as an 8. And yeah, I'll just echo what everyone else has stated about him. So
I can go then for 8 because it was kind of the same thing where I realized I didn't have many Villa players and I wanted to get one in. So I've gone for John McGinn as my number 8. I think he has been
the McGritty.
Exactly. He's been so consistent this year, and he's somebody that I haven't been sold on over the past few years, but this year I think he's really stepped it up, especially with the captaincy. And yeah, I just, it's kind of hard to dislike him for me as a person, but also as a player. I think he's just kind of fun to watch, especially, he's been with them for a very long time. So
club captain too.
Yeah.
This pains me to say, and I know he's kind of played everywhere, so it might be cheating a little bit, but he's been kind of great this season, and I hate as much as as great as he is. I went for Pascal Gross.
Wow.
Just because
that's a good pick.
Just because he's always involved in the attack, and then he is always, forced to go back and defend whenever they are defending. So yeah, pains me to say it, but I think he's been great.
So now another position in the traditional 10 role where I kind of struggled to come up with a definitive answer again.
I did too.
And what's funny is that I actually made fun of Tim Howard for bringing this player up earlier in the season. And I've gone with Cole Palmer in the number 10 role. I think 9 goal involvements in 19 games is a very good return for a player who we didn't really expect to have this big of an impact, for one thing. Obviously, some of those are penalties, but he's, I think, flawless in his career from the penalty spot, which is something that I didn't realize. He's taken many penalties across his time, even in the under 18s league and the under 21s league. I don't think he's ever missed a penalty, which is pretty crazy. So, and then, yeah, of course, he just is basically the thread that's holding Chelsea together at the moment because they swap players in and out like something that swaps a lot. I don't know.
I also have Cole Palmer, and it took me a really long time to think of a number 10 just because I feel like the usual ones have had very slow starts, or like Madison has been injured for 3 months
Yeah.
now. Otherwise, Madison, guys, because I also like looked at like what different news outlets had, and a lot of them had Madison, and I just like didn't feel right putting him in just because he's missed so much.
It's the
time.
same as Van de Ven. He's missed the exact same games as Van de Ven too. So it's kind of.
But I've been really impressed with Cole Palmer, and just like reiterating what you said, like he has been one very consistent piece for a very inconsistent team. And I think he's done a lot to keep that team semi together.
Yeah, I also went with Palmer. I mean, obviously for the reasons that Josh mentioned, but they rely on him so much, and he always seems like he's able to come through.
I wanted to go with Cole Palmer. I ended up not, purely on the basis that I feel like he plays half his games as a winger, or he starts as a winger and then due to substitutions moves into midfield. And so I was just, yeah, I think he's probably the correct answer. I think maybe I was being too strict positionally, but because of that, the only other player I could go with, oh no, is Odegaard. I thought about Madison too. I included Van de Ven despite injury. I think if had Madison not been injured, he would have been my shoe-in pick because he was on pace to just be unbelievable this year. But yeah, I think Odegaard, another one of our pretty consistent players, and when he gets a 9 or a 10 out of 10 though, it's unbelievable to watch. I think he's so integral to what we're doing in the side, and he's the club captain, so I think that kind of adds a little bit of points there. But yeah, I totally understand Cole Palmer.
One addition, like what you said, positionally to Cole Palmer is he also, like, Gallagher generally plays in the center, and Gallagher at times has the tendency to play a little bit stretched back and like somewhere in between an 8 and a 10. So I will say like that allows Cole Palmer to float into that 10, just because they play very narrow. It's a pot system, so they are less tendent to go down the wing than what we're used to seeing, especially nowadays.
Yeah, and Gallagher's a pressing monster too, so he's not really glued down to that 8 position as much as you say, and so yeah, it makes sense that it creates space for Palmer to slide in. So, Josh, we'll stick with you. We'll go left winger. We'll go back across the other way for the forwards.
For the left wing, I threw Son in there just because he's been one of the best players of the league, and I don't know how different our front threes are actually going to be.
Yeah, does anyone not have Son?
I have Son.
Okay. I have Son. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Let's talk about Son.
Yeah, he's the best Asian player in years, but
maybe ever, actually.
Yeah, I would say I think it's really hard to compare him and Kim Jin Park just because Park played like he was a defensive midfielder, and it's really hard to compare him to Son just because they did play two completely different parts of the game. Speaking of Asian players, I just want to say this real quick. Hussein scored a brace for Iraq in the Asian Cup this week. Completely off topic, but that is absolutely insane to me. I apologize for derailing this, but I couldn't go not mentioning that this week.
Put you in timeout.
My number one thing for choosing Son for one thing, and I know it is a little bit cheating because some of his best games of the season came when he was playing as a 9, but I think by and large he's regarded as a left winger. also just looking at Spurs without him is so different. Like he just makes such a difference. He's a creator from wide. He's one of our few players who is actually willing to take someone on one-on-one. He can be frustrating at times, but at the end of the day, he can have the crappiest game you've ever seen in his life, and he comes out with a brace or a hat trick. Like he's just an XG destroying monster. He scores from all over the pitch. And yeah, I mean, I think, what does he have? 13 goals or 12 goals this season. So the stats are there to back him up as well. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, players can be good without being like world class, but if I was making a list of like world class players in the Premier League, Son would make the list. He's a cut above. He's a difference maker. You're nervous when he's on the ball. That's all I gotta say.
Retweet.
Yeah, again, for our forwards, maybe not being that different, I'm going to pass Striker along to Ethan to get us started here.
I mean, obviously he's injured right now and hasn't had as great of a season as he did last year, but I'm still going to go with Holland just because he's top goal scorer right now. I think once he gets back and with KDB in place, he's going to add so much more. And yeah.
I know that I'll go next. I have Holland too. I know there's just like narrative that he's like not as good as he was last season, but he still is
still crazy
he
numbers.
Had the same goal rate that he does last year. Like last year this year he's 14 goals in 15 games. Last season he was 36 and 35. So I don't really think he's about the same as he was last year.
He was more than a goal a game last year. I didn't realize that. That's insane.
In the Prem, he was 36 for 35. And obviously
I have him as well, yeah.
I do too. I think I do think he's playing a slightly different role too, because like you look at the players they lost, some very attacking players that could really, he didn't really have to do anything besides score. Like literally didn't have to touch the ball. And now I think when you've got Kovacic or Mateus Nunes in the midfield, and you've got Julian Alvarez, who's good but still young, and you've got Doku, who's having a good year but relatively
injury issues again.
Yeah, injury issues. He has to do a little bit more, I would say, and he's still scoring bags and bags of goals. I mean, it's crazy. He's been injured for a while now, and he's still top goal scorer.
Yeah. And he's been, like what you said, he's playing a hold-up role significantly more and just better than he did last season, and just helping breathe out the attack a little bit so it's not just pass it to Holland and let him shoot.
Not to toot my own horn, but I did say at the end of last season that this was going to happen. I said that last year was the most goals he was ever going to score in a Premier League season because he was going to get absorbed into the system. So now that being said, he is on pace to match.
He's on pace.
But he was injured. So that's my one saving grace right now is the fact that he missed games.
Yeah.
His stat line looks really satisfying right now if you look at his Wikipedia page, because he has for Manchester City 50 goals and 50 appearances. So
stupid.
Nice even number, nice just ridiculous stat line. 1 goal per game. So yeah, just sheer insanity. I will drop the right winger position off at the foot of Reese, as he's the last one who hasn't got us started here yet on a forward player. And this is another one that I wouldn't be shocked if we all had the same player.
Yeah, I've got Saka. I'm just kidding. I've gone for Salah. Yeah, I mean, he's just unreal, unplayable at times. It is insane how consistently good he has been since signing for Liverpool. There have been rough patches, which is crazy because the rough patches almost don't exist. Like they're almost, you don't even notice them unless he's in your fantasy team, basically. Because him not getting you 50 points a week is like an anomaly. So yeah, I've gone for Salah.
I did as well, just because I think it was against us, but he had gotten like a goal milestone, and it just made me want to focus on him more this season. And just every time he's played, it's been kind of insane.
I have Salah as well, and have absolutely nothing to add.
Yeah, I will add that he broke into you talked about Son being on a list of world-class players in the Premier League. Salah might be in an all-time Premier League 11. Like, if you were to make an all-time Premier League 11, there is an argument that he could be the right winger. Like, he's in the top 10 all-time Premier League goal scorers, which is something that he achieved this season. And just it's not even the goal scoring. Like, he's so involved in all aspects of their play. He's involved on the break. He's involved creatively. He's involved taking people on. He's involved making runs that take space for other players to run into. He just does it all. World class, incredible player. So yeah, I've got Salah as well. And I did throw in a head coach. I don't know if anyone else threw in a head coach or came up with one on the
I
spot.
did not, but I can think of one now.
I had one.
I'll throw mine out while y'all are thinking of it. And it's a surprise to no one that I've gone for Ange Postecoglou, who won the first 3 Manager of the Month awards, and just the fact that he's completely turned Spurs around. I mean, think about where Spurs were a year ago today, and it's unrecognizable what he's done so far this season. So, and it's very entertaining to watch, which is always a bonus.
Off the dome, I'm giving it to Unai Emery.
Yep.
I think having Villa in 4th is unbelievable.
No one would have predicted.
Especially after, I mean, genuinely how bad he was at Arsenal. And I don't say that to downplay him. I think I've said it before. There's this weird thing online that, you know, there's like revisionist history that he was good at Arsenal because he's good at Villa. It's like these things can be mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah.
It's unreal how well he is doing with Villa and where he's gotten them.
I agree.
That was mine.
He took him from 7th to currently, are they in
4th?
3rd or 4th?
They're in 4th place, but I think
2nd, 3rd, and 4th are all joint on points right now.
Yeah,
although
all
City has a
tied.
game in hand.
Yeah.
With addition to European play too. Like, he has been able to increase their Premier League performance and their they're doing well in Europe.
Yeah. I predicted them to do really well, but I did not predict them to be 4th right now. So we'll see how long that keeps up. But the way it's going could finish that way.
Now, this is probably going to be one of the more interesting things. By the way, get in the comments section down below or in the Q&A section on Spotify and let us know who made your team, who didn't, who you agree with, who you don't, etc., etc. Now, here's the deal. Some of our answers were pretty similar in that exercise, truthfully. And this is the second portion of our exercise, which I believe will be a little bit more interesting. So, Ethan, I'll let you intro this section as well.
Yeah. So, obviously, I figured that a lot of us would have the same choices for team of the season so far. So, I thought it'd be good to kind of shine some light on players who don't get talked about enough. So, I had everyone make their underappreciated 11 so far this season. Players who could be considered for team of the season, but probably won't get in just because, players are a little bit better. But yeah. So I'll start off with goalkeeper. And, this was Gage's team of the season so far, goalkeeper. But I've gone for Vicario just because, with how Lloris kind of finished his time at Tottenham, they really needed someone to come in and immediately do well. And that's what he did. So, he made a lot of great saves. And, I think some of the things that do happen with, Tottenham and conceding are not his fault at all, really, most of the time.
I tried to go with players that I actually didn't consider for the best 11 because in my mind that was like, if I considered them, I was appreciating them, like technically in my mind, right?
That's true.
So I know you said you weren't going to have any, but I've got a Crystal Palace player here, and it's Sam Johnston in goal. I think I would say, unfairly dropped. I know he had some injury, right? But
yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's tied for second in clean sheets despite being dropped. I'm pretty sure he has 5, and top is 7.
He's joint 5th.
Oh, look.
5.
Yeah. But
I think, joint 5th, but second most. Yeah.
3rd most.
Out of goalies?
Yeah.
Who has 6?
Onana and David Wright.
Well, they don't count.
Onana.
Yeah, they don't count. I think having 5 clean sheets, especially in a season that Crystal Palace are really struggling, and considering the fact that he was dropped for Dean Henderson, is really impressive to me. And yeah, I think when he played in the Premier League before he signed for Palace as well, I thought he was really, really good, and I was surprised he didn't get a sooner. I was surprised he didn't get a move sooner.
Yeah, it's funny when you told me that earlier that you had 2 Palace players, I was like, I'm about to be the Palace arguer against because just about how annoyed I am with them. But I think that out of all the players, I think that was probably one of the better ones, and I could agree with that. But he's had a lot of great saves. He's been helpful a lot in the results that we have done well in. A few mistakes and injuries have led to Dean Henderson taking over, but I'm sure it'll be a good competition for the position.
I also thought about Johnson, but I also thought about Pickford too, because Pickford is joint top, but he has not faced that many shots. I went with Burned Leno because he also has 5 clean sheets.
Man,
I almost did Leno.
Has 78 saves, which the first is the Sheffield keeper, Burnley keeper, and then Luton keeper. He's the first one of like a not bottom feeder team right now. And I think that's a huge thing is like, yes, clean sheets are important, but you also have to look at who's playing in front of them. And Fulham do not have that many blocks in comparison to the rest of the teams around them. But yeah, he also has a decent amount of like punches and claims throughout the box, so deals with cross as well. But yeah, I just like what he's doing. I think it would have been very easy for him to fall off the face of the earth after kind of being disavowed from Arsenal very quickly. But I think he's done a very good job, especially this season, of bouncing back and forth.
Yeah, he was always a pretty good shot stopper. He just couldn't really keep up with the playing out from the back kind of style. But he doesn't have to do that at Fulham. So it's kind of like what I was saying with Trent's role, where it highlights his strengths. This move to Fulham definitely highlights his strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this isn't really a consideration for being in this team, but the fact that they got him for 3 million is quite the deal as well in today's market. So yeah, I've gone for Burned Leno as well. He has one of the best save percentages in the league at 73%, which is someone who's watched hockey all my life. I hear that number and I'm like, what the? But then you think about the fact that it's actually a very good save percentage in modern football. So yeah, I've gone for Burned Leno. We'll go fullbacks together once again, like we did beforehand. I'll start off with Reese. Now, I guess let's do the right back first, and we'll spend a little time talking about that.
Okay. I've gone for Hinshelwood. This is a player that just interests me so much tactically because he's playing fullback for Brighton, except he's also a striker, basically. Like he goes so far up the pitch and just stays there and just sits and waits. And then also comes back and defends. So he's one of these players that, he can do it. He's young, he's athletic, he's got a ton of energy, but he's just so interesting to me tactically.
I've gone for what might be a slightly surprise pick to anyone who hasn't watched Luton this season, and it may be kind of cheating because he's technically a wingback, but I've gone for Alfie Doughty. I think in a Luton team that hasn't been great this season, I actually think he's been one of the standouts. He's created the most chances in the Premier League from set pieces, apart from the obvious, which is James Ward-Prowse, which is an impressive thing, especially for a team like Luton, which gets, I think, over 80% of their goals from set pieces, as I saw. 6 goal involvements so far on the season, which is huge for a team where goals come at the premium, and 59 shot creating actions from right wing back, which is one of the highest in the league behind the obvious ones like Trent and Udogie. So yeah, really good stuff, really good stat lines for a player in a team that generally has horrible stats. And someone who I've been impressed with every time, seeing his energy, his technicality on the ball, and his positional sense. So I've gone for a kind of maybe a surprise shout for Alfie Doughty.
I have a Kufal from West Ham. I think looked very good this season. Their defense has been okay, but he's done a lot going forward. And despite his red card at the weekend, I think he's looked very well and has given some stability to I think, overachieving West Ham team. But I think he is really well going forward. Has 5 assists on the season. Puts in a great cross to Jared Bowen, which I'm sure someone will probably get to later in this segment. Maybe not, but I think he's just been very good despite getting a red card very recently.
It was a ridiculous red card. It never should have been. Should have been a red. It's one of these 2 yellows for dissent in a short period of time things.
Yeah, I like how a bunch of y'all went very low with like the likes of Luton and obviously not West. I mean, West Ham are not like low in the table, but ones that you probably don't get talked about enough. But I ended up going with Poro just because I feel like when I've been thinking about my underappreciated 11, I feel like, I might include players who do get talked about a decent amount, but I feel like don't get enough love anyway. I mean, we have Gage talk about Spurs, but I feel like they still don't get talked about enough. Porro has the same number of assists as Trippier, and he's the third most tackles in the league right now with I think 61. So I think he shines uh even though there's a lot of good right backs right now, or decent right backs.
100%. And underratedly, he actually might be the best passer on the team too, which is a very interesting fact. Well, and maybe other than Madison, but he has one of the best ranges of passing on the team. So
I guess I can give my
let's,
left back.
yeah.
I've gone for Dan Burn. Kind of the main reason is just because I can't believe he's a left back. He is way too big. But I really didn't expect him to be a mainstay in the Newcastle side. And he's not only a mainstay, he's really important to how they play. Because he's not only solid in defense, he's actually pretty good in attack. And I'm not just talking about set pieces, because obviously he's good at set pieces. He's huge, but
He
overlapping
arrives at the
runs.
back post.
Yeah, he's good at it. So yeah, I've gone for Dan Burn.
I kind of mentioned him earlier, but I went for Anthony Robinson just because I almost thought about putting him on my team of the season, but I do think Udagi has just been heads and above the rest of the league this season. But I just think I love what he's doing. He's doing amazing things. I can't wait to watch him in the Copa America this summer. He's been a really good part of a very solid Fulham defense this season.
Josh is about to list the whole Fulham team.
Yeah, well, you're about to list the whole Spurs team, dude. So
yeah, I can't talk, I guess.
uh,
I've gone with this player just because every time, we've played them more than usual this season, or we're gonna have played them more than usual. He's been annoying every time, and I think he is responsible for having their defense playing as well as they are. I've gone for Mikalenko from Everton, just because he's very physical. Everton, I think, have the second most clean sheets in the league right now.
Yeah.
I think he takes a lot of pressure off of Branthwaite and Tarkovsky, just because when people attack them, they have, obviously the way to go is on the wings, but he bosses it every time. So he's been super annoying to play against every time. So respect.
well, Reese and I are on the wavelength today because I actually originally had Anthony Robinson in my under the radar team, and then Reese put him in his actual team this season, and I was like, oh my god, I can't have him in the under the radar team if Reese has him in his actual team of the season. So then I switched it to Dan Byrne, who I looked just while we were kind of talking here, and this will not surprise anyone because he's 6'7", but he's won more aerial duels in the league than anyone else, which yeah, he's 6'7", but still, that's a very valuable thing to have on the team. And I think just because he should be doing it doesn't mean he shouldn't get credit for doing it. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on Dan Burn as well.
Do we want to
Center
do our
backs.
center back pairings together?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll start it off. Ethan talked about Everton. I've gone for Branthwaite. I think,
Dude.
I think he's really impressed me. He's really young too. Everton's season is really weird because when you look at the table, it looks way worse than it is. But they had a 10-point deduction. And yeah, they've been really solid in defense. Ethan mentioned I think they actually have the joint most clean sheets. Maybe not, but yeah, they definitely at least have the second best defense in the league. Yeah, he's just a joy to watch. Partnering him, I've gone for a player who may not be universally underrated, but this one I had to include because I think he's underrated amongst Arsenal fans, and that's Gabriel. I think the reason I would consider it is because Saliba gets all of the recognition, which I think, he's very good. And most of the time it's rightfully so. Gabriel is also pretty consistent. The thing about him too is he's consistently having to cover for a inverted fullback, which isn't really happening on the right side. So he kind of has a little bit more defending to do. And he's a consistent goal scorer now. We've gotten really good at set pieces. And he also he's a defender who you can tell loves defending, which is really fun to watch, I think. So I had to include him just to give him a shout.
I don't know if anyone else feels like this, but I feel like I have the Mandela effect with Gabriel and Saliba's footedness. Like, I think every time I think about them, I'm like, oh yeah, Saliba plays on the left. Like, Saliba plays on the left for sure. Gabriel's got to be on the right. And then you said that earlier, and I was like, oh my, like, it's not the first time I've ever had that happen to me either. So I don't know why that is, but yeah. I'll piggyback off you because I had Branthwaite in the team as well. One of the things that tipped the scales for me is the fact that he was not expected to come into the team. Like he entered in there due to a center back injury crisis for Everton at the beginning of the season, and he's been outstanding. I think Dyche hasn't been able to take him out of the team ever since, and he's been great. He's perfect for the Dyche system. Dyche loves just a giant English dude as a center back, and especially one who wins a lot of aerials, has a great range of passing, can step forward into midfield if he needs to. And Branthwaite fulfills all those categories. And one of the things that tipped the scales for me actually is the fact that James Tarkovsky, his defensive partner, was recently on Ben Foster's podcast and talked about the fact that Branthwaite is one of his favorite defensive partners he's ever worked with, in terms of the fact that they just have such a great relationship together, and he reads the game so well. And Tarkovsky seems to think that Branthwaite's going right to the top. So I'll take that as a good opinion. My other center back is the person who we've referenced before as the W-man, and that would
I
be
almost had him, dude.
Craig Dawson, who is underratedly. I mean, it's not like your kind of sexy flash center back that you would think, but he is one of the few players in his time in the Premier League who has played Erling Haaland off the park, and it happened this season when Wolves took a victory over City. He's got a few goals to his name as well. He's a threat from set pieces. And he's been a huge factor, consistent factor in a team that's been ravaged by injuries at certain points this season for their progress under new manager Gary O'Neill. And it's been a huge success for Craig Dawson to come in for a team that I thought was going to stink. Like, I thought this team was going to be horrible. And Dawson has been one of the big reasons why they aren't horrible. So, yeah, a mention for Craig Dawson from me.
So, unlike you two, I went for the other large Englishman in the Everton defense. I actually went with Tarkowski. I just think he's been a little bit more. I think he's been a little bit better just because I think he has that little bit more experience over Braithwaite. He's second in the league in interceptions. He's like fifth in blocks. And like what I said with Pickford having joint top clean sheets, I think a big part of that is because Tarkowski has taken a lot of the blows, which would lead to Pickford having more saves. But I think Tarkowski has just done a great job of clearing out the pack. I'm going to go for Ethan Pinnock as my other center back. Yeah, you, Ethan.
Ethan Pratt.
He's been great. He's third in the league in interceptions. He has the most blocks in the league. Nope. Most what? I'm dumb. I just had this. He has the most tackles for, I don't know. He's got some outrageous stats. I lost them. I had it prepared.
Bubble fucking the numbers here.
I'm trying to find them. But he's been great. He doesn't have as many blocks as Tarkowski just because he plays in the back three and it plays on the right side of it. So relies a little bit less on that, but his distribution has been great. But I also just love that he's a late bloomer, like coming from non-league and working his way up. I just really love what Ethan Pinnock's been doing in that Brentford side this season.
So I've actually gone for a two pairing of Ezri Konsa and Diego Carlos, just because obviously Konsa has been one of the Villa defenders for the longest time, but continues to perform. And I think Diego Carlos has come in and done a good job of taking the place of Mings, who I think has not played that much at all this season through injury, I think. So
yeah, he's been injured.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think Diego Carlos is a great pick. I thought about putting him in. He really has been. I mean, I think we mentioned it before because I asked about it. I was like, where did this guy come from?
Yeah.
Signed him last year, but immediately got injured pretty much. So he's basically been a new signing, and yeah, he's been so good.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take a page out of Josh's book in terms of the player that actually has the most tackles in the league. And this is accurately sourced information through the Premier League website. And that's my number 6, who is João Palhinha. And yes, you might say he's not really under the radar because he has been linked with a move to Bayern through all eternity and almost moved there in the summer. However, what is not talked about enough is the fact that he has the most tackles in the league. He has
By a
90,
lot.
and the next person has 67. So he is improving on the next closest person by about 150 or by 50%. He has like a 50% increase from the person with the second most to him, which is insane. He is a threat from set pieces. I think he scored against Arsenal this season from a set piece. He's almost scored against Spurs from a set piece. And he's also someone who has a good range of passing on him. So I think he's just very integral to the Fulham system. And he's someone who I wouldn't be surprised to see move to the likes of a Bayern Munich or similar stature club in years to come. So
Yeah, I had the same thing, João Palhinha. And solely based on the fact that he's got a lot of numbers in terms of tackles compared to the second most tackler in the league. So yeah, that was pretty much it.
I also have him for the exact same reasons.
I didn't go with them kind of on the basis, I'm pretty sure he was top tackler in the league last year as well. So he's kind of
I think
on
so.
the radar. So I wanted to shake it up and give recognition to this player because I think he's really done a job that I thought would be impossible, at least until next year. Like, I didn't think it would be immediately solved, and that is replace Declan Rice in West Ham's system. So I've gone for Edson Alvarez. I think, yeah, he's seamlessly made that transition, which I thought would be really, I didn't think it would be fully realized until next year at least. So I wanted to give some special recognition to him.
We'll stick with you, Reese, in terms of our your pick for the number 8 role.
Yeah, so this player actually wears the number 6, but I think he positionally plays as a number 8, and that's Ross Barkley. He kind of wasn't on my radar until we played against Luton, and man, he was just so good. Like, I think in that game, probably the best midfielder on the pitch. And from what I've heard online from Luton fans, this is kind of just what's been happening. It's just gone under the radar, which is why I wanted to stick him in. So I think, this is kind of his second revitalization, because when he was at Villa, he was like really good and then disappeared again. Like, I think probably because of an injury, but then joined Luton as a free agent, I believe, and again has kind of had this resurgence as a number 8.
The Premier League posted a Twitter comp of him the other day, and it was like, how good has Ross Barkley been this season? And I read that and I was like, what? And then I watched the clips that they put together and I was like, wow, he actually dominates the midfield, takes shots from key areas, and is involved in a lot of the play. So yeah, good shout by you. I've gone with a homer pick on this one. I think it's a player that doesn't really get talked about too much because he's not really high profile. And that's Pape-Matar Sarr. I've gone with him in midfield. I think just purely for the fact that this guy has legs for days. I don't think he ever stops running. He's got the telescopic leg to win back balls in the midfield. He complements Basuma so well. I actually think Basuma looks like crap whenever Sarr's not on the pitch. Like, I think they have such a great relationship together that they're almost symbiotic, to the point that Basuma like cannot survive without Sarr in the team. And I think that role just he is absolutely perfect for the right-sided 8, the sort of box-to-box player who's not necessarily the most creative. They don't necessarily have to worry about getting assists and goal contributions, though he has gotten a few this season at key times. A goal against Man United early on in the season, of course, is the big one. But he's also not necessarily someone who's tied down babysitting fullbacks and progressing the ball from deep like the 6. I just think this role, the Postecoglou right-sided 8, is ready-made for him, and I think it's just incredible that he's doing it at his age as well. So
I'll go next. I actually made this change maybe 20 minutes ago because I was thinking about it more. And as much as I crap on Palace players, I wanted to at least shine the light on the one who I've always considered to be one of our more underappreciated players and who consistently, does a job every week. And that's Jefferson Lerma. I think every time he's been great at recoveries. He's had to play with so many different options in the midfield because it's just rotated so much. He's great at getting the attack going and passing forward and stuff like that. So I just kind of wanted to shine a little light on him.
So mine isn't exactly an 8, more of a forward thinking 6 or somewhere. He's a 7. He's somewhere between a 6.
He's a left winger.
I went with Lewis Cook. A much more improved player, especially this season from last season, and a very up and up Bournemouth team. Has looked very good. Half an expected assists per game, which is kind of crazy for a player for where he plays. He kind of plays in between the defensive midfield, and he's kind of box to box, but doesn't get forward as much. But I think he's been really good in a very new looking Bournemouth team that looks significantly more stable than they ever have in the past. I think he's been a breath of fresh air this season from what he used to be. Yeah.
Josh, you want to stick with 10?
Yeah. So for 10, this is a player I absolutely shat on all of last season and in our season preview, but I'm going with Paqueta. I think he has looked absolutely amazing this season. I think he has controlled his play a little bit better. I think last season he was all over the place so much, especially with his finishing, and just he was trying to do too much on the ball. I think he's reeled it in a lot, and it's made him that much better of a player. His passing looks significantly better. When he decides to shoot, it's just smarter, and everything around it is smarter. And I think it's helping take the burden off Declan not being there, because they have a little bit more going forward than they did in the previous seasons.
I don't know why
next.
Declan Rice is being referenced by his first name exclusively on this
I don't
podcast.
know. Declan
Everyone's
sounds
just like,
better than Rice to
Declan,
me. I like the
Declan.
name
It does to
Declan.
me too.
I like the name Declan.
I'll stick with
Okay.
the carbohydrate.
I'll go next because I also have a West Ham player. I've gone for Mohamed Kudus just because I feel like, they brought him in this season. And he just looks so confident every time he has the ball. He's already scored a lot. I've gotten a few assists as well, but he brings that team together and brings it forward. I feel like there was a moment where so many people were talking about how much he was contributing. So I think him and Boa look so great together in the West Ham team.
I've gone for a player who's not necessarily what you would call a traditional 10 by nature, rather more of a sort of shadow striker, someone who exists in the space behind Erling Haaland, and that is Julian Alvarez, who I think it's a little bit difficult to include a City player in your like under the radar team because they're the best team in the world, at any given point. But I think it's more of the fact that he doesn't really tend to take up the spotlight. I think people are way more apt to talk about the likes of Haaland, the likes of Foden, even, Bernardo Silva, Jeremy Doku, etc. But he has had 11 goal involvements in 20 games. Not all of those being starts, of course, as he often comes off the bench as an impact player, taking some of the pressure off the fact that Haaland's been in and out of the team in the last few games. And I think that's also part of the reason why we were talking earlier about the fact that, they don't have to rely as much on Erling Haaland to score all of their goals. And it's because Julian Alvarez has stepped up in a big way this season. So yeah, he's my pick for 10. I know, again, it's kind of cheating because he plays everywhere, but I'm calling him a 10 in terms of the fact that he's behind the striker. So
He was almost my pick, but then I was like, I don't really want to put a City player into underappreciated.
yeah, I just kind of had to do it anyway.
Yeah.
The player I've gone for, I think it's kind of weird to put him in because he has struggled with injury for a lot of this year. But because of that fact, it's really easy to tell how important he is to the side. And I think he has a big ceiling. And this is my second Palace player. I've gone for Eze. I think, he continues to prove that he's one of the best prospects in the league. Gets better and better. He's asked to do a lot attacking as well. Because you look at some of the players ahead of him, it's not super inspired. And he's really at times carrying the attack. He's great in transition. And he's just fun to watch. He actually reminds me a lot of Ozil, with the way he kind of like glides around. I think maybe his output isn't quite there yet, right? But I think just the way he moves reminds me of him a little bit.
He's a piece of gold in a mind of turds. So, so yeah, obviously it looks like he struggles sometimes, but yeah. The last few games I've been, thinking about, how he's been, but he's also playing with a little bit of an injury. So I still think he's good with his injury. So that's a great show.
Ethan, let's stick to you for the beginning of our forward line at left wing.
So I've gone with I forgot what Pep said or whatever, but that
The
Asian
Korean guy.
or that Korean guy, Hwang Hee-chan. Oh man, he's been kind of great. I know at first Wolves didn't start out too good, but as soon as Pep uttered those words, he started doing amazing. And I put him with a shout out to Neto because I feel like Neto also doesn't get talked about a lot, and I think he's one of the best or top assisters in the league right now. So yeah.
I'll jump in because I've also got Huang Hee-chen. Kind of, he actually was kind of in the limelight for just a couple of weeks because of that incident, and then he continued to get a goal involvement for the next few games. He kind of stopped being talked about, despite the fact that he continues to get goal involvements consistently. And he's been a big reason as to why, as Gage mentioned, Wolves aren't as terrible as we thought they were going to be, and they're actually kind of good. Especially in attack. We thought they were going to struggle in the attack, and he's consistently good.
Yeah, I've also got him in my team. I decided to put him on. I think you can kind of put him anywhere in the front three because he has played all three roles. I put him on the left because I think that's where he plays in Wolves' best 11. If you put, like, if Neto's healthy, he's on the right. If Cunha's healthy, he's in the middle. And then, so I think that leaves Wong on the left. What's funny is that he actually started off as like the league's best super sub for like the first 5 to 6 games. And then O'Neal finally had to, based on performance, he just couldn't keep him out of the team. So yeah, I've gone with that as well. And the fact that he is an insane presser. Another one of these players who never stops running, wins lots of balls in high areas in the opposition half. And he's just excellent in all regards of the Wolves system. So yeah, that's who I've gone with as well.
I have him on the right for all the same reasons. He played on the right this weekend, so that's where I stuck him because of someone else I wanted in the team.
Which is?
It's Elonga. I think he's just been sensational this season, and a team that has struggled a little bit going forward just without Tony. I think he's been a very bright side of a team that has.
He plays for Forest.
Oh.
Well, the point still stands because he's been without Awani's been injured too, and it's a very similar stylistic profile. So the point still stands. I'll cover you off on that.
Thank you. In a Forest team that have not had a whole lot of other production in and around him, I think he's been a great player.
I still can't believe United were so willing to sell because he really looked pretty good last year. Yeah, he looked pretty good, and I mean, especially considering how lacking they were in the attacking front, and then they sold him for chump change too. It was like 20 million.
Cheap.
I say chump change.
Yeah, it's like
million, but
I'll take some chump charity on that one.
Yeah.
All right, striker. Now, this is one that once again I wouldn't be shocked if we all.
Do we want to do our other wingers before striker?
Yeah. That's a good point. Let's do our right winger. So I'll jump in on that one. I will. Again, another player who plays in multiple different roles. So you could kind of say, is that really where you're going to put him? Yes. It's Harvey Elliott, who is someone who I think whenever he does play, he's usually in midfield, but I kind of wanted to squeeze him on anyway. And I think while Salah's gone, he will more than likely be playing, a more advanced role. He's someone who every time I see him, I just think he's an incredible technician. Just for such an attack-minded player and someone whose first instinct is usually to shoot or put someone else through on goal. I'm just constantly stunned by how good of a how much of a technician he is, and I think that's partly due to the fact that he's traditionally a midfielder. Even when he plays on the wing, he brings a lot of those midfielder attributes to the table, and he's just extremely versatile And I think that's valuable. Honestly, Liverpool are kind of turning into one of those teams a little bit like City, where they just have a group of front players
Yeah.
who just kind of do whatever. And it's a big strength for Harvey Elliott, who can play in any of those roles across, the front couple players in the midfield and the front three. So, yeah.
It's impressive that, like you mentioned, how good of a technician he is, especially considering the fact that he's a player who's recovered from a broken leg injury.
Yeah.
In the past 2 years or whatever. Maybe, I feel like it was kind of recent. I'll give my pick at right wing next. It's kind of interesting because somebody else has had this player in their team, but in a different position, which I thought was interesting. And I think they are a very versatile player. But I've got Kudus as my right wing. I think he has deputized as a 10 at times, but
That's where he's been playing
every game.
mostly. Yeah.
Oh, I thought he'd been playing on the wing, but maybe
No.
I just don't know. But
I had to double check myself. So
my pick
Well,
is
anyway.
fake. Then you can skip me.
sorry. Yeah.
Okay, Josh. I was gonna say who's your right winger, but it's Huang. Ethan, who have you got on the right?
This is not really. I mean, you could put a shoe in for him for team of the season so far, but I went with Bowen just because I feel like he continues to perform very well every season. He's probably one of West Ham's best players.
Okay, in terms of striker, like I said earlier, before we decided to go for wingers first, I think this is one where I could see everyone having a similar player. And mine is not someone who's necessarily been under the radar for the fact that he's joint third in the league for goals scored. Dom Solanke, who for me is quote unquote under the radar in the fact that, like, I didn't realize he had 12 goals. I know he's kind of been involved and he's been scoring a lot, but yeah, just a great level of contribution. Very good in hold up play. I think that's something that he's actually always had in his game, is the fact that he's able to battle physically, wins lots of second balls, wins lots of headers, is great on a knockdown. He just hasn't always had the goals in his game. A lot of times before now, he's kind of struggled to add that element to his game. And this season, he's really found a way to make it work. So that's going to be my pick.
I also went with Dom Solanke.
Yeah.
Just because he, for the longest time, I thought, he was just one of those young English strikers who did really well in like under 23s and something like that. But I didn't, think he would do that well outside of that. But he's actually shown this year that he's got that he's got that style on him to be able to produce numbers like that. So I went with him.
I've also got him. I also just double checked myself. I think the reason I thought Kudus was playing on the wing is because he played on the wing against us both times, actually.
I think when he's been subbed on a few times, he has played wing.
He started this game, both games actually.
Well, I'm just saying when he has been subbed on, he's been used as a winger a few times.
The thing about it is, like, if you look at their lineup, they don't generally have a traditional quote unquote winger. They play with like what I would call inside forwards more than they do play with wingers. So I mean, he kind of exists somewhere in the space between a 10 and a right wing. So,
Yeah.
it's excusable, or it makes sense,
Do we all have Solanke?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
They all kind of hit on the head.
Yeah, I mean, you could put a shout out for Ollie Watkins, but I feel like he always does this, so he's not really underappreciated. I think we all recognize.
Yeah, the thing about Watkins is we were expecting it, right? Yeah. This is just so unexpected from Solanke. We even talked about it. Like, we talked about where are goals going to come from.
I think we shat on him in the preview.
Yeah, we did. We were like, how are they going to score? He consistently doesn't score. They bought him for 30 million. What a waste of money.
Yeah.
I've also thrown in a head coach in this team. I know everyone else may not have done the same thing, so I'll go ahead and give mine at the beginning here and let everyone think for a minute. And mine is, I've picked this because this was someone who, I mean, it was even rumored that they were thinking about sacking him. It was at the beginning of the season. They had a very tough start to the season. They've stuck with him, given him time, let his ideas had time to brew, and that's Andone Iraola at Bournemouth. And I think he's underappreciated in the fact that not many managers are able to bring a team or bring his, stature back from the brink of destruction. He was right on the edge of being removed from his position. And I think just the fact that he's been able to stick to his guns, say, no, this is the way we're going to play. We have a young team, lots of new bodies in. We're sticking to it, and it's paid off. I say in the long term, but honestly, half a season, more or less, is the long term when you start off the way he did in a managerial role. So, yeah, good move for Bournemouth's ownership group, and I've gone with Iraola as my pick for head coach. Does anyone have one in mind yet?
Yeah,
I did.
I'll
Okay, you
go
go
for his counterpart because he used to be at Bournemouth, and that's Gary O'Neill. I think I think he's had a great time stepping in as manager last year. Really, I mean, we thought it was a bad decision. Obviously, it's kind of panning out that they decided to go with somebody else, but he's still succeeding in his new role at Wolves, which we've talked about repeatedly. We thought were going to be absolutely terrible this year. So I think he's done a really great job.
I almost went with Indoni as well, Areola, or I just called him a tit. But
That's
I'm gonna go.
Alphonse.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with this guy just because of where y'all had them, and he's
Oh, here
at
we
the beginning
go.
of the season. I'm going with David Moyes, just because a lot of people had him getting sacked, and them finishing in the relegation zone, but they've got him in 6th right now, so I think that's underappreciated.
This is my D-Day, having West Ham in the relegation zone.
Pay your dues.
I'm gonna stick by the fact that I will say they are overachieving despite the fact that they continue to do well every year. I'm just gonna say they're overachieving.
I also, like Ethan, have Sean Dyche just because I said that they were going to be
Ethan
relegated.
does not have
What?
Sean Dyche.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I have
No, I do not.
someone who we all said was going to do poor. I have Sean Dyche just because I think he has done a lot with that Everton team that we at least I thought was going to be relegated, and they look like they're going to escape it. Sorry, Ethan.
Yeah. I
Wrong.
mean, they would be
wrong
12th. They'd be 12th without the deficit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, wrong words came out of my mouth. I apologize.
No, you're good. I think Sean Dyche is a decent choice for underappreciated, but then again, you kind of just like throw big guys out there and defend. I'm playing set piece guy for sure. I just hate Everton, so
All right, let's forego the elements of picking starting 11s and move along to the few kind of games that we have to review this week. Of course, the highlight for us in terms of us here on the show is the fact that we had a slap showdown on the weekend. Now, it's definitely one that Ethan will probably want to forget, but I think this is I will call it a benchmark result for both teams. I think 'cause it gives a pretty good indication of the direction of travel at this exact moment. And so I'll start with Reese because he's on the positive side of the coin. Now, I'm going to ask the question, not because I'm leading into it, but do you think 5-0 is a fair score line, or was it a little flattering to Arsenal? And I genuinely have no opinion. I'm just asking.
No, I thought it was fair. I thought we were pretty good, and I thought Palace were pretty bad. To be completely frank, I hate to say it, but I think that's how it is. I think we definitely needed a result like this as well. So I'm happy it came. I think part of the inflation is due to the fact that Palace are a little bit out of form, and we were at home in this game, coming off of the break where we, especially with the context of us really needing a big win, with some open play goals, which at first I still thought wasn't going to happen, considering Gabriel got on the score sheet. I thought he got on the score sheet again, ended up being counted as an own goal, but yeah, I think pretty solid performance from Arsenal. Admittedly, I think there's probably more to be said from a Palace point of view than there is to be said from an Arsenal point of view. I think the main takeaway is just the fact that the way I phrased it to Ethan before the game actually was, I said, I need us to open the floodgates because we just haven't been scoring. And I actually predicted to one of my friends at work who's an Arsenal fan. I told him I was hoping for a 5-0, and he said that I was crazy. And then the other day he was like,
fucked, idiot.
yeah, the other day he was like, man, that's a great prediction. Never saw it coming. But yeah, I think the goal scorers, I do think, what I will say, maybe 5-0, I think 4-0 probably makes more sense. The fifth goal was kind of fake because Palace just kind of stopped playing.
It was the exact same goal that he
It was
scored a
the
minute
same
earlier,
goal,
like
yeah.
carbon copy.
But 4-0, 5-0, it's kind of the same. At that point, your mind's not really in it. I think Martinelli getting on the score sheet though is really big because obviously he was so important to the side last year. Hasn't really had the same impact this year, and then was actually dropped in this game. He got these 2 goals as a substitute. So it's big for his mental. I think this win is good for our mental. And that's kind of all I got to say. And I'll throw it over to Ethan.
The annoying thing is that this was the best case scenario for you and the worst case scenario for me, just because I knew going into this game we were going to lose. But the fact that it was 5-0 is so ridiculous. I mean, obviously it is deserved, but it's like that's just not a result you want to see, especially when you wake up at 6:30.
Yeah.
So something with Palace and waking up at 6:30 and giving away huge ass results like that. Like that was also the 7-0 against
7-0.
Liverpool.
Yeah.
I'd rather it be normal kickoff if that's going to happen, but yeah, this game I've been ignoring talking about it just because it's so ridiculous, but I think now's the time. I've got my notes right here. This game felt like a tipping point because it's just everything unfolded when the 80th minute rolled around and the Homesdale fans presented what was a sign that critiqued our owners and talking about, the lack of direction and planning and how we can't just breeze by like they've been doing was seen by everybody. And so like everyone who hasn't been, obviously y'all have me to talk about these things, but to the people who are watching that game, now they're aware of what we're exactly feeling about the club right now. So, Roy saw it, all the players saw it, and then it kind of just unfolded after that. And the thing about it is that a lot of Palace fans are like agreeing that something is wrong, but everyone has a different opinion about what's wrong. A lot of fingers have been pointed at Steve Parrish and the rest of the investors. A lot of fingers have been pointed at Roy. I think it's just a big mess right now. And I think you could point the finger a little bit at everybody, but it's the fact of the matter is that it will not change probably. I want to say that Roy gets Sheffield United next week at home. And if he doesn't win, he's going to be gone. But, it's not going to happen. I want it to happen. It should. That's the most logical thing, but it won't happen just because, I think Steve Parrish is kind of stingy because he was the only one that actually backed Roy coming back after he was brought on halfway through the season last year to see us to safety. He was the only one because he was cheap and, experience was there that he's kept us up before. But yeah, so everyone's united, but, kind of on differing opinions. So it's annoying to kind of like see us argue when there's like we should all just be united in the fact that we're all mad. But Joachim Anderson came out after the game and said that, we need the fans, everyone's behind Roy. We just need your support still. And I'm like, the way you've been playing makes it look like you're not on board with Roy. You just kind of flat out laid an egg. And this was the thing that, maybe made me know that we were going to lose the game. Is that our attack this game was Schlupp, Mateta, and Hughes. Those were our attacking 3. And I'm just sitting there thinking, we have a Brazilian wonder kid who we spent almost 25 million on to be Wilfred Zaha, basically. And he only gets Everton the first time. He didn't even get to, start the second game, which we lost still. So it's quite literally a mess. And we still haven't, I mean, we've got, 7 days left of the transfer window of January, and we still haven't signed anybody. And so we need people in just to make up the numbers. We need quality. And my biggest grievance right now is that I think Roy is relying too much on the downfall of other teams right now. He's emphasizing the fact that, Luton or, they're down there, Burnley are down there. And he's like, I think we're at a good spot right now. And I'm like, these other teams are not concerned with you at all. They're not even thinking about you. They're just trying to help their situation and get out. And you're relying on that. So what happens to the fact that if we keep playing like this, we're going to fall into the spot that they're in, and we're going to be so defeated with how we've been playing recently that it's going to be hard to get back up. So that's been my biggest worry right now. But yeah, we've got Sheffield United at home next. So I'm really hoping for a change of fortune, but with the way we're playing right now, it's quite awful. And this is kind of like up there with one of the worst spans of playing that we've had. One of the Palace fans I follow, Dan from HLTCO, has mentioned that it basically has felt like a chore to watch every week, and so that's kind of what it has felt like for me.
I wanted to bring up, I watched Roy's interview after the game, and I thought it was interesting because they asked him directly, are you going to sign anybody before the window closed? And he essentially said, I'd like to, but it's not up to me, kind of type deal, and said, at this point, I think we're going to just have to wait for our players to be fit. Because basically what it seemed like is that Roy does want to sign players and he's not being given the money. Now, does that mean he wants to sign another goalie? Maybe, I don't know, or another CDM, some random player that they don't need. Who knows? But from what it seemed like to me, Roy does understand that there's a need to bring in players and there's just a lack of funding.
Yeah, and I can see his grievances there. I think that's a definitely a point that he could make to the owners, which is why people are pointing the finger at them. But also, you've got so many players left on the bench. Like, why is França not playing? That man is magic. That man has come on every time and impressed me. I've not been there. I mean, maybe there was one game where I was like, okay, that wasn't his best performance. But every time he's come, why are we playing Will Hughes on the wing? Why? That it makes no sense to me at all. At what point in his life has he played wing? He didn't even play. He played maybe 15 minutes in the FA Cup against Everton. Why is he not playing? He's probably more fit than Will Hughes is. So it's just these little he'd rather use these players that he's used for so long to play in positions that they don't play in, rather than try out these players who we've invested in. So
Yeah.
that's the point I have against Roy. So that's why there's a lot of pointing the fingers with multiple different people right now.
Yeah, my thing about it is like he can point the finger at the board and say, "Oh, it's not up to me. It's not up to me." All you want, but at some point he has to change something. Like
Yeah.
he, at the end of the day, yeah, it may not be up to him in terms of the fact that he can't bring in as many players as he might want or whatever. He still has to coach the team. Like he has the team that he's been given, and he has to make decisions that he thinks are going to help win the games. And I'm not saying he's not doing that. Of course, he obviously is making the decisions that he thinks is the best thing to do in terms of getting a result. But I'm just flabbergasted at certain decisions. Like, why is David Ozo not starting games
Oh my
ahead
goodness.
of like someone who's come on and made a difference in multiple games, including against Man City?
Right. Yeah.
Showed he was
Gone
comfortable in
missing.
the league.
He's gone
Yeah,
missing.
he's been fired into the sun. Like, why is he not starting games? I don't understand. And it's just little
Yeah.
things like that you bring up, and it's like it seems like the answer's right there. Like, okay, yeah, he's gonna say, well, França and Ozo don't have the experience that they need at the top level. They don't have the physicality. They don't have the blah blah blah. It can't get much worse.
Oh,
Like,
It
it's
actually
funny.
reminds me a lot of not quite the same position, but when Arteta first came in, and it was immediately after Unai had been sacked, so we weren't doing that great. And I was begging on the podcast, why don't we try out Smith Rowe? I know he's a young guy, but we don't have any other center attacking mids. And then he played, and he was our most important player that season. It's literally the same thing with Francis. Like we've talked about it when like managers are close to being sacked. It's like, what else do you need to do to play? Like, how bad would Palace need to be doing for França to start starting games? Because at this point, it seems like y'all are at the bottom, right?
Yeah. And the annoying thing about it, and he did it again, and I absolutely hate him for this, is that he brought on Ozo in the 68th, Ahamada and França in the 76th. And he had the audacity to go in his press conference and say that the youngsters were subbed on at that point and didn't take their chance. You didn't give them enough time, and it was 3-0 down. What is the matter with you? That was absolutely ridiculous. He said that in a different game a long time ago, but that made me so mad because I was like, you're literally putting the blame on them when they didn't hardly get a chance to do anything. I thought Ahamada did great when he came on. He had like a good chance that got past one of the fullbacks. That made me so mad. And then the Swan song, they're bringing on 35-million-year-old James
Oh
Tompkins
my
in the
God.
87th minute
Yeah.
to
When
see
that
out the
happened, I was
defeat.
like, okay, cool.
I don't understand. What was the point in that? So I think Roy, complain all you want about not having funding. I agree with you. You have just lost your absolute mind And I'm sorry, this is you need to go as fast as possible. I've been Roy out for the past million years. So it's quite literally a shit show right now. And it does feel like an absolute chore to watch this every week.
100%. All right. Well, what a breakdown by Ethan. We'll leave that there and we'll move on to a team or a game that we probably don't need to spend too much time on now due to the fact that we said it was going to be a shorter episode and it's now an hour and a half into recording. That is the fact that Brentford earned a 3-2 win over Nottingham Forest. But the more important thing about it is that they have Ivan Toney back from his 6-month suspension after, or was it a year? I can't remember.
It was 8 months.
8 months. Okay, yeah. 8 month suspension, most of which, or some of which was in the summer, of course, which is why the timeline kind of gets confused. But he's back. And of course, he scored a controversial goal where he moved the ball off the invisible spray. And he's back making a difference. Now, I'm curious to know, I was slightly perturbed by some of Tony's behavior leading up to this game. Like the fact that he comes out and does these interviews and says, instead of saying he's happy to be back at Brentford, like he's very grateful that they've shown him this level of loyalty to keep him around, have him train, and they're going to throw him back straight in as soon as he gets back. He's talking about, well, a big club might come along here in January and I'm going to move on and make a big difference somewhere else in the Premier League. It's like, dude, come on. Like, just let your play do the talking. Go out there, represent the team that's been super loyal to you for all these years, puts you through, like, has stuck by you in the wake of this 8-month suspension. Give them some loyalty. Don't come out and do all these just like stupid interviews. I don't know. I'm not sure what y'all's take on that is, but that's kind of my 2 cents.
I mean, obviously there's a story to be told if he's, struggling with his gambling addiction, but also the fact that he's been given a platform for all these things when there's literally like, I think, is it Brooks from Bournemouth literally beat cancer and then when he came back scored. So it's like, why didn't they give him a platform? So it's like, no. I don't want to, I don't really care that much about it, but it is weird to see.
He definitely did some backtracking because I think the final interview thing he had, he was like, oh, well, for now I'm a Brentford player, so I'm going to do my best. And it's like, okay, but you've just spent this whole interview talking about how you're going to leave. But
yeah,
it is what it is. I think he will be fully in on Brentford for the rest of the year. I don't think it's going to affect his play. I do think it is questionable decision making for sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to affect his play because on the flip side of it, like if he lets it affect his play, he's not going to as easily move somewhere, which I think he would probably be upset about because it doesn't sound like he really wants to stay there.
Yeah.
I also think it kind of just benefits all parties because his stock is at an all-time low right now in terms of the fact that if a team was coming in to purchase him, we haven't seen him play for 6 months. So it helps all parties if he comes back, smashes it for the second half of the season, and then he gets a big move to wherever. And I think, I don't know. Yeah, I think and he probably will do this, but just, kind of dial in on the play, score goals, do what he does. And so far so good. Of course, he scored from a free kick against Forest. Now,
I wanted to ask about the free kick because I don't actually think I have an issue with what Tony did because he gets away with it. It's not really on him to be the
police
to police himself.
Yeah.
But why is VAR not allowed to intervene with the ball not being in the right spot? Because it does give him a clear advantage. He's able to more easily get it around the wall.
It's just I think it's the common sense thing that needs to be added again. Like if it makes sense to change the call, let the call be changed. Kind of what we've talked about this before. I've talked about it like ad nauseum about how I feel about it. But it's like what you said, it's not his responsibility. And if we're gonna start nitpicking about like this sort of stuff, then we have to start nitpicking corners and throw-ins. Where's the ball going to be thrown in at? Like there's so many little things where it's like if we nitpick these sort of things, like it's just going to be it's gonna be ridiculous to talk about all of the different.
I kind of agree. Like I agree. Like a throw-in could be contentious because it like leads to a goal eventually. This one's just kind of high profile since it's a free kick that
directly
leads
kick.
to it's a direct free kick to a goal. Because I do think if a corner had been taken and it wasn't on the line, I think it would have been overturned. That's what I think.
I more or less think that I equate this to like a penalty. Like imagine if Ivan Toney gets up, takes a penalty, moves the ball off the penalty spot closer to the goal, and then scores the penalty and no one says anything about it. I mean, that's
Yeah.
more or less what happened. Like, and what I don't understand is again, like you said, VAR can clearly see where the referee has sprayed the vanishing spray, and then Tony moves it a foot and a half off to the side where it's not touching it anymore. And I I just can't really comprehend why VAR is not allowed to intervene in certain areas. And I understand what you're saying, Josh, about the nitpicking thing, but I don't know. VAR's biggest purview is like goals, penalties, red cards, right? I mean, this is directly involves one of those three categories. So I guess it's just kind of a frustrating thing with VAR.
I want to make it sound like I do think VAR should have stepped in. 'Cause it's like a super easy talking to the fucking microphone and tell him he moved the ball. Like that's I don't even think that's getting into like the minutia of what VAR is supposed to be. It's just like, hey, we just saw something. Maybe it's no different than, hey, you should go look at this little screen and take a look at this.
What's funny is referees are allowed to do that in the laws of the game. It's just VAR didn't intervene because I think there's a famous Thierry Henry goal where he scores a free kick. The referee says take the free kick again. It wasn't in the right spot.
And then he
He
scores
scores it again. But the point of that being he scored the goal initially, and the ref said, no, do it again. It wasn't in the right spot. So we know that's within the powers of the referees. I don't know. I also don't want to take away the fact of the main occasion is Tony being back and scoring. I think that is the main point.
Yeah.
I don't want it to turn into like a VAR thing, but
Yeah.
I was going to ask earlier about the prognosis for these two teams because I think they're in this group along with Palace and Everton, I would say, of teams who have not especially Everton's kind of a special case, so we'll take them out of it. But teams who have not quite had the season that they want to have so far, I think teams who have struggled. Forest obviously have now brought in Nuno, which is a crazy gambit. It's kind of worked out for them in some instances, but I will. I did this exercise with you all earlier with West Ham, Chelsea, and Newcastle, and we're going to do it again here in terms of Brentford, Crystal Palace, and Nottingham Forest. What order do you think they will finish in, highest to lowest? Not necessarily position, but like what order do you think they'll finish in? Of course, right now the order is Brentford, Palace, Forest, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are.
I think Brentford will finish first of the group. Just I think Ivan Toney being back to make a massive difference. I think it's going to be Forest. And I have Palace in third just because they've shown the reluctancy to do anything different, whether that's managerial or just changing the manager entirely.
Yeah, I would actually, that was what I was going to say, just because I feel like Brentford have been dealing with, something circumstantial with like obviously injuries and Tony just not getting back. But Forest, I think with them, they're still, they have so many bodies still that they're still trying to gel. And obviously it's going to take time. So just hasn't happened immediately, especially with all the players they brought in this summer transfer window. And then Palace, just because what Josh said.
yeah, I'd agree with the same order. My one note on Brentford actually would be that I think Tony is going to have a good impact on the team. I don't think they're going to start climbing the ranks of the table like some other people seem to think, because you have to keep in mind they're still without Mbumo for most of the season. I think until at least March or May, something like that. Maybe it's not quite as long. I think it's March. Anyway, maybe I'm making that up, but I know he's missing a large portion of the season. And I would say he is as important as Tony is in this side, especially considering, I mean, you look at when he was playing and Tony wasn't there, he was really, quite honestly, carrying the team to some of their victories.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the order. And another thing about Brentford is I'm kind of agreeing with your point that they won't start climbing the ranks immediately because they still have this issue where I think they haven't been as good defensively as they have been in the past. I think Nathan Collins has quietly had a shocking season. Actually, I think he's been brutal.
I agree.
Which in the past he's been very good. So, just something to keep an eye on from that perspective. And yeah, I'd agree with the order though in terms of Brentford, Forest, Palace. I think my feeling on Forest is that they actually will be closer to Palace than they will be to Brentford too. Like,
Yeah.
I think the Nuno Gambit is not a great one. And I just don't. Every time I look at their squad, I just see a bunch of NPCs. Like, I think it's because they signed so many players in one transfer window, like Ethan said, but I just never know what you're going to get from them. And also, Matt Turner's been horrible this season. That's another point I want to bring up, which I hate to say because he's the U.S. #1. And he's not getting too much help in front of him, but I think he's been brutal a lot this season. He's given up a lot of errors leading to goals. So, yeah, I don't know. Just kind of my 2 cents there.
I will
I
say,
don't
I
know.
think if Palace were to sack Roy and bring in the likes of Steve Cooper, I could see it. I could see the order changing up quite a bit.
Yeah.
I
I don't
go
know.
ahead.
Sorry, Ethan. Didn't mean
No,
to
you're
cut you off. I think Palace just. I feel like there's been so many signs to sack him so far, and they just haven't. That it's gonna almost be like us last season, where it's so late that it's not going to be able to impact the season very much.
I know we're basically just waiting for someone to jump us, and it's going to be too late. That's what I've been thinking about recently, and how Leicester had to deal with that. But my one note on Brentford was that I think they need to find a way to get Maupay more involved, because he came on and scored. And so if you can find a way to get him and Tony playing together, I think that'll be a good way to get goals.
Josh, how do you feel about the fact that you watched the same exact game against Ipswich that happened previously on Boxing Day?
Extremely annoying, because now we're like, it's literally like now we are 7 points clear of Ipswich again. In a little bit worse shape just through injuries and Daka not being in the team right now. And Hazma Chowdhury getting arrested for a DUI. So
No shit.
yeah, so the midfield is a little thin at the moment. I think Dennis Pratt's going to have to be our talisman for a little bit. Southampton have been on a tear. We have Birmingham for the 3rd time this season, this weekend in the FA Cup, and I really would like to lose and be out of the FA Cup already. But we're in the process of signing Sensi from Inter Milan as another option, just because Cassidy was recalled on loan back to Chelsea, which I don't really know why, because he's been extremely okay in the Championship. So I don't really know why they seem to have an inclining to bring him in. Just kind
That's
of
their level.
yeah, that's Chelsea. That's fair. That's a fair assessment of it. But I think once we get through the injuries, we'll be fine. I just think I'm still not terribly worried about not making at minimum the playoffs like I have been. So injuries, lack of injuries would be nice. But the squad is so much better than everyone around us. And Fatawu will be back in a week and a half. So
Yeah, the nice thing about that FA Cup game is it absorbs one of his suspension games.
Yes,
So
which is huge. But I'm happy with where we are at right now. Kind of wish we had less injuries is really the only huge thing at the moment. But other than that, I am fairly happy with how we're playing right now.
let's do album of the week.
Okay, so I was going into this episode thinking I had already done this album, but I haven't. And I've been on a real big 90s hip hop and rap kick recently. And this is probably, if not one of my favorites, I've gone for Illmatic by Nas. Oh, wait, hold on. While Gage is talking to go get it. I went with this one just because there's no doubt that The World Is Yours is my favorite rap song. I first heard it when I was playing NBA. I forgot which one, but it was an NBA 2K game, and it was one of the songs, and I just think it's a great song. It's got Nas does a great job sampling a bunch of old funk songs that I like. Nice. See, we're twins. But I thought it was funny because I usually try to pick albums based off of the way Palace play at the moment. But I was like, yeah, I'll just pick this and be fine. But I found a way to make it like that, because there's a song called Life's a Bitch, and then there's Halftime. So that's
Life's a
me.
bitch, and then you die.
and then
which
you
is
die.
actually what he states. So
Yeah, but then halftime. So
Yeah.
that's just me watching Palace in the first half. So yeah, but it's a great album, and I've over the years found multiple different songs that I love on it. So yeah, I'm a big '90s hip hop guy.
Jersey of the week, Josh.
I got this summer when we were in Boston, but it's a Boston Red Sox Raquel Devers jersey. The oldest stadium I've been to. It's been around since like the 1910s. It was awesome. We stayed like 2 miles away the first half of the trip, and I did like a run or two where I like ran around Fenway, which is just kind of, for being where we're at, like where we used to be, like in DFW, it's like a completely weird thing to be able to go like run around a stadium as like part of like being in the city. So that was really cool. Fenway's beautiful. Like they have a garden where they like grow all of the produce for the games, like for what they feed the players and even some of the concessions. So highly recommend, if you're ever in Boston, check out Fenway Park.
The Green Monster.
That thing is super cool in person. It's wild.
Yeah, I liked the Red Sox growing up, so I actually got to go a long time ago. I wish I could go now, where I could grab a pint and walk around the old stadium.
They have like special Sam Adams beers for the stadium too. It was pretty cool.
Boston is just an incredible city overall. Like
I agree.
I don't think I've ever heard someone who's been there and said a bad thing about it. The only thing is the massholes, but they were actually very nice when we were there too.
Yeah, the stereotype was not true at all about them being like not bad people, but just like very rude,
I guess. Yeah.
which I did not get at all personally.
They're definitely different to Texas people, but they're definitely not bad people for sure. But that is the one stereotype that gets leveled at Boston a lot. So. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we want to say a big thanks to you for tuning in and joining us this week once again. I'm going to say a big thank you to Ethan for joining us as well.
Yep. Thank you for letting me ramble. And I'm glad we were able to fill the time. I feel like I can never say that we're going to have a short episode ever again.
No, I know. The last 2 weeks we've been saying, oh yeah, it's going to be under an hour. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. And it hasn't been the case. So
we find a way.
We do. Reese as well. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting once again.
And Josh, always good to have you.
Thanks. You did a great job hosting as per usual. But
big shout out to the listeners as well for sticking around with us. We hope you enjoyed our team of the season, under the radar team. Drop yours in the comments. Let us know what you think. Tell us why we're wrong. All those things. We hope you stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy the the FA Cup first, and then the return to action in the Premier League. So it's a goodbye from us.